The wind rushed through the mountain valley like a warning that night as Elizabeth Nelson stood on her porch, staring at the angry mob gathered outside her small wooden cabin. The snow-covered ground reflected the glow of their torches, lighting the bitter faces of people she had known her whole life. Their eyes were filled with judgment, anger, and disgust. Elizabeth's hands shook as she held them over her round belly, protecting the life inside her. A life she never expected to have again. But this moment did not happen overnight. To understand how Elizabeth reached this terrifying point, we must go back to the beginning. It started months earlier in the quiet mountain town of Cedar Ridge. This was a place where gossip spread fast, and people's opinions were sharp. Everyone knew everyone, and no one's secrets stayed hidden for long. Elizabeth had lived here for more than 30 years. She was the town's gentle, kind schoolteacher. Children loved her, parents respected her, and the community trusted her. She was known as a woman of grace and patience. Her husband, Thomas, had died 2 years earlier in a mining accident, leaving her alone in their small cabin near the woods. The town had mourned with her then. They had brought food, comfort, and kind words. But 1 year later, all of that love faded when her life took a shocking turn. It began in early spring. Elizabeth started feeling strange, tired, dizzy, emotional, and sick in the mornings. She thought it was grief or age catching up. But as days passed, the symptoms grew stronger. She finally made the long trip to the town doctor, expecting news about illness or stress. Instead, she heard something that made her world spin. She was pregnant. Elizabeth was 55 years old. Her first reaction was disbelief, then fear, then tears. It felt impossible. She had not been with any man since her husband's death. She lived a simple, quiet life. But the doctor confirmed it again and again. She was carrying a child. Elizabeth decided to keep it private, hoping to understand it herself first. But secrets never stayed hidden in Cedar Ridge. Within weeks, whispers began. People stared longer when she walked by. Then the whispers turned into rumors, and the rumors became ugly stories. Some said she had lost her mind. Some said she was a wicked woman doing sinful things behind closed doors. Others said something unnatural was happening in her cabin. Before long, the town that once loved her turned cold and cruel. The school board held a quick meeting without inviting her. The result was a short letter delivered to her door. She was fired. The letter claimed she was not fit to teach children anymore. Parents who once thanked her avoided her in the streets. Children who used to run into her arms now watched her with confusion and fear as their parents pulled them away. Elizabeth tried to ignore it. She wrapped her shawl tight around her growing belly each morning and prayed for strength. But as the months passed, the cruelty grew worse. Someone threw stones at her windows one night, shattering the glass. Another morning, she found her small vegetable garden destroyed. Her well water, her only source of water, was spoiled with garbage. The message was clear. The town did not want her there anymore. Elizabeth felt her heart breaking each day. She sat by the fire at night with her hand on her belly, talking softly to the child growing inside. She did not understand how or why, but she believed the life inside her was a gift, not a curse. Still, she felt lost and alone. One day, when her supplies ran low, she gathered all her courage and went to town. She hoped things had calmed down. She hoped someone, anyone, would show kindness. Instead, as soon as she entered the general store, the room froze. People turned and stared at her belly. Someone whispered loudly. Someone else laughed. And then, the store owner shouted at her to leave. Elizabeth tried to explain, but her voice was drowned out by angry words. A group blocked her path, accusing her of shameful behavior. The more she tried to speak, the louder they became. Finally, Elizabeth pushed through them and ran. Tears blurred her vision as she hurried back home, terrified the crowd would follow. That night, she sat alone in her cabin, shaking. The fire burned low, and the cold night wrapped around her. She prayed for guidance, for help, for a sign. What she did not know was that someone was already watching over her. Late that night, she noticed a shadow moving near the trees. A tall figure stood just at the edge of her property. He did not come close, did not speak, did not cause fear. He simply watched, as if guarding her home. And as winter approached, the mysterious figure kept returning, always staying hidden, always silent. Elizabeth did not know who he was, but she began to feel less alone. She would soon learn that he carried a secret that could change everything, hers, his, and the whole town's. The winter snow fell thicker as the days passed, and Elizabeth's belly grew heavier. The mysterious figure continued appearing at the edge of her cabin every night. He never stepped forward, never spoke, but she could feel his presence like a calm shield standing between her and the darkness around her. Some nights, Elizabeth left a small basket of bread or soup on the porch. By morning, it was gone. She began to believe that whoever he was, he meant no harm. Still, fear lingered because the town's anger only grew stronger. Whispers turned into warnings. Warnings turned into threats. Groups of men rode past her cabin at night shouting insults, promising that she would not stay in Cedar Ridge much longer. The church women gathered daily to pray loudly for her soul, as if God himself had turned against her. Her heart broke a little more each day. Then came the night she would never forget. The sky was dark, the wind strong, and snow covered every inch of land. Elizabeth sat near the fire with her hands resting on her belly when she heard footsteps outside. Many footsteps. Voices followed. Angry voices. She looked out the window and froze. A large crowd was walking up the hill toward her cabin. They carried torches. The firelight flickered over their faces, and she saw nothing but cold anger in their eyes. At the front of the crowd was preacher Timothy Hill, a man known for his strict beliefs and fierce sermons. He raised his torch high as he stepped onto her porch. Elizabeth opened the door slowly, holding her coat tight around her. The cold wind hit her face, but the heat of the torches made the night feel like it was burning. "Elizabeth Nelson," Preacher Hill said, pointing at her belly as if it were a crime, "the time has come for you to answer for your sins. You have mocked God and shamed our town. Tonight, we put an end to this." Elizabeth shook as the crowd moved in closer. Men, women, and even teenagers surrounded her home. These were the same people who once shared meals with her, brought flowers to her classroom, and thanked her for teaching their children. Now they stood united against her. "I have done nothing wrong," Elizabeth said softly. "I do not know how this happened, but I have not broken any promise or faith." But her words did not calm them. People shouted at her. Someone called her a liar. Someone else said she deserved to be driven out into the cold. Preacher Hill stepped closer, his face tight with anger. "You will confess tonight," he said, "or we will decide your punishment ourselves." Elizabeth's fear grew. Her body trembled. She held her belly, praying the baby inside her would stay safe. She could feel the danger closing in. The crowd took another step forward. Then, a sound cut through the night like thunder. Hoofbeats echoed through the valley. Strong and fast. The crowd turned. A horse burst through the line of trees. A tall man rode into the clearing, snow flying behind the horse's hooves. The rider pulled the horse to a stop and dismounted. He walked forward with steady steps, his dark coat blowing in the wind. Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat. She knew that face. Ethan Moore. A man she had not seen in 20 years. A man who disappeared from Cedar Ridge after her husband died, leaving behind questions and rumors. His hair was now touched with silver, his face lined with years of hard living, but his eyes, those familiar eyes, had not changed. He stepped between Elizabeth and the crowd, his body a wall of protection. "No one is touching her," Ethan said, his voice firm and calm, but filled with strength. "If anyone lays a hand on Elizabeth or her child, they answer to me." Quote. The crowd shifted uneasily. Everyone in Cedar Ridge knew Ethan's history. He had lived in the mountains, survived storms, fought wild animals, and was not a man to threaten lightly. Preacher Hill tried to stand tall. "This is not your concern," he said sharply. "This woman has sinned and must face judgment." Ethan turned his head slightly, eyes cold. "Elizabeth has committed no sin," His calm voice silenced the crowd. Even the wind seemed to slow. "I know the truth," Ethan said. "And it is time the rest of you know it, too." Elizabeth stared at him, confused and shaken. What truth was he talking about? Ethan slowly looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her heart race. Regret, pain, and something even deeper. He was about to reveal the secret he had kept hidden for 20 long years. He took a breath, ready to speak words that would change everything. "Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know." Quote. The torchlight flickered across Ethan's face as he stood between Elizabeth and the furious crowd. Snow swirled in the air, but no one moved, no one breathed. Everyone waited for his next words. Ethan looked at Elizabeth with a softness that made her knees weak. Then he turned back to the people of Cedar Ridge. 20 years ago, he began, "I left this town because I fell in love with someone I had no right to love, my best friend's wife." A gasp moved through the crowd. Elizabeth felt her heart stop. Her hand covered her mouth. She had never imagined he would say such a thing aloud. "I loved Thomas like a brother," Ethan continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I would never betray him, so I left before my feelings could cause harm." He paused, his eyes glistening in the torchlight. "But on the night of Thomas's burial, when grief was heavy, when both of us were broken, we made a mistake. One night of weakness, one night we both regretted the very next morning." Elizabeth's head lowered as tears stung her eyes. She remembered that night. The pain, the tears, the loneliness, the warmth of friendship turning into something neither of them expected. They had promised never to speak of it again. And Ethan left the next day. The crowd erupted in whispers. Shock, judgment, confusion. Ethan raised his hand for silence. "You can judge me all you want," he said, but Elizabeth remained loyal to Thomas's memory. She didn't seek comfort again. She didn't sin. She didn't break any vows. What happened was my fault, not hers. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded letter. "This is a medical report from a doctor in Denver," he said. "I spent months searching for answers to something even I couldn't understand at first." He unfolded the paper, his voice strong. "Elizabeth's pregnancy didn't begin recently. The child she carries is the result of that night 20 years ago. The doctor explained that in extremely rare cases, a pregnancy can remain dormant for years. It is rare, but it is real. And this child is not a curse. She is a miracle." Silence fell. The crowd that had arrived angry now stood speechless. One woman lowered her torch. A man stepped back. Someone whispered, "A miracle." Preacher Hill tried to speak, but his voice shook. This is impossible." Ethan looked at him with calm eyes. "What is impossible for God?" The preacher's face reddened. His power over the crowd was slipping. A young woman stepped forward first. Sarah Miller, one of Elizabeth's former students. She looked at her old teacher with tears in her eyes. "We were wrong," Sarah said softly. "We all were." One by one, torches dropped into the snow. People lowered their heads in shame. Some walked away quietly. Others whispered apologies. A few cried, realizing the cruelty they nearly committed. Elizabeth stood frozen, overwhelmed. The anger, the pain, the fear, months of suffering, melted into tears. She looked at Ethan, her voice trembling. "You came back for me?" Ethan stepped closer. "I never stopped thinking about you. When I learned the truth, I knew I had to protect you. I'm sorry I left you to face this alone." Elizabeth reached for his hand. He took it gently. In his touch, she felt safety for the first time in a long time. The crowd slowly left until only snow, silence, and peace remained around the cabin. Days passed. Things changed quickly. Shame turned into regret, and regret turned into support. Neighbors began knocking on her door, not with anger, but with blankets, food, and soft apologies. The same people who once turned their backs were now offering help. When the time came, on a peaceful February morning, Elizabeth brought a baby girl into the world. Ethan was by her side, holding her hand, whispering encouragement. The baby was healthy, warm, and perfect. She had Elizabeth's soft smile and Ethan's deep brown eyes. Elizabeth held her daughter close and cried tears of joy. All the pain she endured seemed worth it for this moment. Ethan kissed Elizabeth's forehead. "I will stay," he said. "If you want me to. I'll raise her with you." Elizabeth looked at him with full heart. "I would like that." Spring brought new life. Flowers bloomed, trees blossomed, and the people of Cedar Ridge slowly learned from their mistake. Elizabeth returned to teaching. Parents trusted her again. Children ran into her arms. Ethan became a respected man in town, helping the community with his hunting and carpentry skills. Their daughter grew up surrounded by love, not judgment. She became a symbol of hope and proof that miracles can happen, even when the world refuses to believe. Years later, when people spoke of that winter, they did not tell it as a story of shame. They told it as a lesson about kindness, about truth, and about how love can survive storms stronger than any winter wind. Elizabeth found love again in the man who waited 20 years to hold her hand. And she never forgot the night he rode through the snow to save her. Because the child that the town once feared became the child who saved them all.